in brightest day, in blackest night. All other podcasts tremble in fright. Losers cower before the power. Oranges lust and blues you can trust. Indigos feel and white ones heal. Yellows scare and green ones dare. That sapphire love and black hands glove will rock your foundation without hesitation. Chad and Mars face evil's might. Respect their power, for they'll make you see the light.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Marble.
I'm Chad Bogelman.
And this is the LanternCast.
Episode 576. Our legacy numbering. It's actually, you know what? No, it wouldn't be legacy numbering for us. If we were doing legacy numbering, our legacy would be longer than the Green Lantern legacy numbering. Do you notice that about this issue?
Yeah, I've heard people talk about it as they were. Oh God, the Mets are losing by more than they were. I've heard about people punching holes and how the math makes no sense. Which to be fair, most legacy numbering and when people, which is one of the reasons why, spoiler alert, you don't keep friggin' restarting your books with number one issues all the time, because if you really gave a shit about legacy numbering, you wouldn't do that. Or if you only did it like twice, it'd be real easy to figure out, well, if we left out the annuals and just did the monthly issues, what number would this be? But nonetheless, yeah, I mean, if we factored in spin-offs and we factored in different things, it definitely would be more than 483, considering we're almost there now.
583 is what's the legacy number? You said 483.
Did I?
I'm pretty sure.
Well, either way. Well,
I could have heard.
Maybe. Either way. If I did, let me fix it now. Well, if we did legacy numbering, yes, it definitely would be more than 580. You're probably right that I did do that. Just because it flows better in my head. So I think I almost did it again. That if we were doing legacy numbering, it would definitely be more than 583 because we're practically there now, and that's without. So it would take very little finagling of looking at spin-offs and mini episodes and remember we have those reign of the 599 the 499s or whatever, or 399s when your colon blew up. So those are at least like 3 episodes more right there.
Regardless, DC, if you're going to do some math, show your work. But we have Green Lantern number 16, it's not really a special, but it's, they're doing a bunch of all-in labeled covers and stuff like that. So this is our all-in special, I guess, of Legacy number 583, as Mark had mentioned. This is titled Civil Corps, and then it says One World War, writer Jeremy Adams, artists and cover artists are Manico, colorist Romulo Fajardo Jr., letterer Dave Sharp. Then we have our variant covers, assistant editor Jillian Grant and editor Paul Kaminsky.
Well, at least we see, as you're going to talk about it, one of your big criticisms last week was how we got no answers. This week we definitely have some answers to some things, but we also get an answer, which again, like many of these things, comes like half-assed. At least we can understand why there was a Civil Corps special, because even though we don't entirely understand why they chose the term, it's a storyline. And that was like the prologue, and this is like part 1 of the Civil Corps storyline.
Yeah. So apparently, I was correct in a manner of speaking that the presence of a planet outside of the orbit of another planet so suddenly should do some damage, because whether it's intentionally or not, it seems to be intentional. Mogo's presence has utterly destroyed the planet of Thanagar. Either by just presence or by an actual blast. It seems to be an attack, but it's not actually explicitly said, so who knows? But regardless, billions upon billions of people are supposedly dead as John, Hal, and Carol lead a surviving Thanagar member onto Iranian battle cruiser. Uh, and they're trying to hightail the F out of there, but they can't because a thruster is damaged. So Hal and John elect to go outside to distract and give them some time to get away. While Carol's like, I'm not ready for this. And he's like, yeah, I know you're not. It's totally fine. But you know, a ship is a ship and no one knows more about them than you. Help them get their ship running. And she's going to stay behind to do that while they go out and fight. Meanwhile, over on a Durlan ship, the remaining Durlan Council is talking through a bit of what's going on, and trying to get this Iranian ship that Carol's trying to repair and Hal and John are about to defend out of the way so that nobody knows about what's going on with the Durlans. And then they kind of talk about, they assume that Mogo will, his effects will dissipate as Tharos's power fades, and they talk about how the plan was that the United Planets will be led by the Durlans and secure a Durlan regime for a millennium, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. And but Tharos apparently had become mad with power, and his experiments in technology corrupted him. Because, and we get a little bit of we get part one of an answer here. Apparently his ability to control the spectrum came from doing experiments on Kelly, because she was able to tap into the Owen or the Malthusian green energy without anything provided by the Guardians of the Universe. So they were using her knowledge and her technology to do further and further experiments on both of those, aka her and her technology. And the early results of that are what Tharos has been using on his end, but they're saying that those were early results of those experiments, but apparently their scientists are on the cusp of perfecting it. So there was a bit of a rawness to what Tharos was using and how. We cut to Kelly's consciousness, and she's kind of in her own head, but calling for help, and she hears somebody coming to her, and it's Ellie, because Ellie has heard her voice in pain and came to help her. So I guess Ellie met her in her consciousness. We only get one page of that, so there's not much to go off of there. Then somebody comes running in and interrupting their meeting, letting them know that two Green Lanterns are interfering. And basically, this is just a big old space fight with the United Planets Lanterns, who are all wielding different colors at the same time. And John and Hal are fighting against them. John is going to take on the Lanterns that are attacking the ship, and Hal is going to take on the weapons. And then the Star Shroud starts to interfere with everything, and they end up fighting up against him. Meanwhile, Carol is led down to the engine on the Iranian ship, and she doesn't know anything about it, but she trusts her powers. She goes, "You can build with this energy, Star Sapphire, but can you map with it too?" So she taps into the engine, and she does figure out what to do. And she says, "Tell your captain, let's get ready." She says, "All right, Carol, let's fly." And her energy lights up, and to the point where the entire ship lights up. Hal recognizes it and says, "That energy," and then he goes, "Atta girl." And as they're taking on and distracting the Star Shroud, Hal sends a construct at the Star Shroud, which distracts him, while John sends a boxing glove at Star Shroud, punching him in the way of the jets at the edge of the ship, of the Iranian ship, just as it powers up to blast off with Carol's help. And Hal's like, "I saw that boxing glove," and John said, "I thought I'd try it." They talk about how they need to head to Oa to see if guys have any friends safe. So they blast out of there in construct vehicles, just plowing through all these lanterns like they're nothing, and heading towards Oa. Star Shroud appears back on the ship of the Durlan, says, "All right, then that's where we're going to go." They say, "Hey," one of them says, "You don't give orders to us," and the Star Shroud immediately kills him. And then we see that Tharos is not dead, but being reborn, and he says, he whispers a word, "Oa," and suddenly teleports his body out of there. Meanwhile, on Oa, Larfleeze is still wrecking shop and distracting people while trying to get his power back, while Guy and Shepard are releasing Simon and Badge and a Green Lantern that looks sort of like Saint Walker in terms of like a head, tail, and the whole thing. Guy grabs Joe, and they head to a hiding spot towards the crypts. And then, meanwhile, back on the Ranian ship, they're at light speed or at zeta speed or whatever. They're trying to figure out how long until they get to Ran, and the readings are crazy, and they can't tell where they are. Carol's about to pass out, but someone from the bridge says to bring her up here because she needs to see this. And the captain is standing in front of his monitors with a massive predator just outside the ship's windows. And by predator, I mean the entity Predator or the Star Sapphires. So
now
that's it.
Yeah. Let's see if we actually get a real. All I'm going to say is this. We better get a real explanation for why, assuming this is really an entity, why it's there and why it exists, because we know the Predator shouldn't exist. All I'm going to say is, if Jeremy fucks this up and doesn't acknowledge that, basically writes this as if the Predator, of course the Predator's around, why wouldn't he be around? If we don't get an explanation, I don't know, man. I think I might be done with this book. There is the only entities that currently exist in the Green Lantern universe that we have been introduced to, or that we know exist. We know our Parallax exists because he's never been taken out of the universe to refill the reservoir. We know that the Convergence Parallax entity exists because Convergence Hal Jordan is still around. It's possible we have another Splinter Parallax, if that was what it was supposed to be.
From the 0 Hour special.
Yes, yeah. Or like I still suspect he probably merged with ours to make a whole Parallax. But yes, that is an unknown quantity, that there could be a Splinter, very small, in the cosmic scheme of things, weakened version of Parallax, because there's no way he should be as strong as anything else. The other, a fully intact entity, or the other 98%. And we have a growing Rage Seed red entity in Earth, which even Jeremy, that's what makes me nervous. Jeremy didn't remember that seemingly either. So those are the only entities that we know of that can, or by hints, that either exist or are coming. So why now? We know Carol's the one who kind of set this ship on its destination to go where it's going. So I'm hoping we're going to get an explanation for this. But all I'm going to say is, if it's something like, oh no, kind of like how like the how the Blue Lanterns were back on Odom and all these other things, and it's like, I don't know. It makes me nervous. As you and I have discussed, this issue is better than the Civil Corps special, but then again, that's swimming so far upstream at that point that, I mean, it almost by default had to be better. It could have been. I guess it didn't. I guess it could have been worse, but it would have been a Herculean effort for this issue to be less effective than that issue, because we do get some answers and we do have some repercussions of things. I mean, Carol does have her moment, so I guess that is kind of cool. But then again, to be perfectly blunt, they gave Carol a moment a few, like 4 or 5 issues ago, which we never got an explanation for either, when she basically was able to rescue Hal when she was about to be drained by, the Shadow Lanterns, which again, it's almost like they're making it, the implication somehow are like Carol's power isn't being drained or is acting different. And I don't quite understand that, because especially we never got an explanation for how she got Hal out of there either. This is less of a problem, but I'm saying, building on that little question mark, it's like, don't give a shit about Varan. I mean, I didn't care about him in the book we should have cared about him in. It bothers me a little, like the Kelly's thing is going to be the key to the entire emotional spectrum, when she really didn't have that much of a tie to it to begin with. I don't know. Because in a way, if I remember back to the Thorn run, didn't they kind of establish that one of the Guardians one of those two Guardians, not either the one that was obsessed with magic or the female one that was trying to stop him or working against him, created the gauntlet? I thought they did. I know the female one created Joe's ring, I believe, but I thought the gauntlet was created by one of those two as well.
I don't think so.
But so that means we would never have gotten an explanation for where the gauntlet came from, unless other than it was
Right. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I see, I understand that you don't care about Kelly, so like I get that, but at the same time, Kelly is here, and I would much rather them be tying her into the Lanternverse and in some sort of way, even with what Jeremy's doing, than just letting it be that some teenager figured out how to independently tap into the spectrum and have it never tie back into the Lanterns ever again.
I guess, but based on what they're doing with it to make it so
But we don't know what they're doing with it yet.
we have seen the results of it so far.
Mm-hmm.
The results of it, they're using it to essentially castrate all the individual Green Lantern Corps to be kind of useless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. It's okay. I mean, we knew that again. Hey, Tharos is not really dead as he's being taken over by becoming kind of like the new probably it's like the Radiant King or whatever. It's like I said, take the goddamn ring off his finger last issue after he was down. I still think that would have been high priority for John Stewart, considering his whole point of keeping the ring on him was to make sure he always knew where it was and to keep it out of enemy hands. That should have been pretty high priority. There's a lot of stuff going on in this issue. There's a lot of everybody. I mean, a lot of compared to last week, it's better, but I still didn't enjoy it.
Destroying a major planet in the DC universe like Thanagar is crazy. So that's definitely going to have some long-time repercussions. I do like that. First of all, I do like that Zermanico is back, especially after the last issue. I do like seeing Hal and John sync up real well together.
That was good. Yes.
They know what needs to be done and they do it. They don't even really have to tell each other their plan. They just get to work. I do like that Hal immediately recognized that Carol's not up for this, but he knows what she is up for and what she can handle and lets her do it and trusts her to do it. Because as we were talking about last issue, I thought it was an absolute shame that Carol was there and didn't do Bo Diddley. I mean, quite literally, and how we know that Carol's supposed to be appearing in the pages of Justice League Unlimited. So what the fuck is the point of having her there if you're not going to take advantage of the fact that she is there by doing something with her? So this was, I think, a good use of that. This is a good way for her to utilize her lantern power and dip her toe in lots of things, because she just witnessed the destruction of a planet. So she is now very, very familiar and thrown quite into the deep end of the scale of things that heroes and lanterns deal with. And then being expected to perform after seeing such unprecedented destruction, being able to do it regardless of, she's not fighting, but she's doing something. And she's doing something she's not sure she can do, but then she's like, you know what? He trusts me to do it. I will trust me to do it. And she's like, I don't know if this energy can do it, but let me try. Like I thought that was cool. I thought this is a good foray for her to just sort of dip her toes in the water and kind of get into more serious things. And I trust Carol to be able to do that with the Star Sapphire energy. We've seen it before during like Blackest Night and Brightest Day, and then later on into the New Guardians series. So we know she can handle her own, but the Jeremy Adams run has been acting like, Carol doesn't have that perspective. So if we're going to get back in the idea that she needs to gain that perspective a bit more, then I do like the kind of baby steps, mild toddler steps that she's taking here, and that she just wasn't expected to go out and fight with John and Hal and hold her own. So that was cool. This is interesting. The thing I wanted to mention here is the United Planets led by us will secure the Durlan regime for a millennium. That's interesting because I forget the guy who in some iterations of the Legion of Superheroes is considered the founder of the Legion of Superheroes. In Legion of Three Worlds during Final Crisis, that guy is assassinated in front of a United Planets Council meeting, And as he dies, it's revealed that he was a Durlan all along, and everybody in the United Planets Council, I remember, loses their mind that they could not believe he was a Durlan. So if for anybody who's a longtime fan of Legion and knows of that guy who founded, I have the trade next to me, but I'm not going to bother going off on such a tangent that I'm pulling it out just to search for his name. When he was killed during the beginning of Legion of Three Worlds, and he was revealed to be a Durlan, everybody in the United Planets acted like it was a big deal. So the idea that the United Planets there is established there, the United Planets reacts negatively to the idea of a Durlan. That's interesting here with what we see here with them trying to further the Durlan regime within the United Planets for a millennium. That's interesting. Kelly, we don't even get a full answer on that, just that Kelly is a part of it, how they tapped into the energy, what her gauntlet actually does, how it does it, and why they couldn't immediately perfect it and had to figure it out. Maybe Kelly's is doing it wrong, and because they wanted to do the entire emotional spectrum, they had to do even more work and advance on that technology. So there's still more to be learned there, so I don't really feel like that's much of an answer. So honestly, for me, all this is a good moment for Carol and a good sequence of just Hal and John syncing up and doing their damn thing, and figuring it out. Like they fight. Star Shroud shows up. It's another thing they got to deal with. They immediately distract him. They even have John of all people has a little bit of fun and throws a boxing glove construct. I thought I'd try it out once in my life. Not bad. And then they have an entire freaking army of United Planets lanterns of various colors come flying towards them. They don't even look back, and they're just like, we got time. And they get their construct vehicles and just blast off. I will say it's a little odd that these UP lanterns were giving them all kinds of trouble in being able to hold their own, either as a group or as individuals. But now they're just able to suddenly blast through them like they're cardboard.
Different rings.
I guess, but Hal had his ring when he was.
That is true. So as I was saying it, I was already dissecting my own counter, and the reality is yes. Plus we're going to talk about the rings thing in a few minutes. But the reality is, that
because then he got captured by Amanda, and that ring.
You're right. That's where that's right. That's where he ended up. It was, but because it never made any sense how he was able to be taken out so easily after he got the new ring. So there's a little inconsistency in the way they're writing the Shadow Lanterns and their power and everything else is an understatement.
I will also say my last point, I think here, other than I do like the moment between Guy and Joe, I think my last point here is, God, these Durlans on this council are so stupid. Because Star Shroud comes back in, he's like, you don't give orders and then he immediately kills him. There's a difference between teaming up with a power who is far greater than yours because your goals align versus thinking you have control over that person. This is not like the immediate thing that's coming to mind, speaking of Amanda Waller, is the Suicide Squad movie where Enchantress's heart can be stabbed at any particular moment, so she has actual power over Enchantress to hold her in check. They don't have that power over Star Shroud. This is just our goals align. So why they think that they can just walk up to a power so much bigger than them and tell them, hey, you don't give orders here, keep your shit in line and not suffer the consequences is fucking crazy to me.
It's like The Dark Knight Rises. It's like what happens with Bane when Ben Mendelsohn character thinks he's in, and when Bane says, "Do you think that gives you power or control over me? Do you feel like you're in charge?"
Yeah, your goals are aligning, and you're teaming up to get the work done. It doesn't mean I have to shut up and listen to you every chance you get. You know your place.
You know your damn role, and shut your damn mouth.
Yeah, it's
But honestly, I'll be honest. I'm just happy Zermanico's back. There's a lot of really good coloring in ours. So actually, because of a lot of different coloring, the Star Sapphires and the different colored lanterns and stuff like that. Special shout out to our colorist Romulo Fajardo Jr., who has been our colorist all along, but he really gets a chance to shine here.
All right, so let's go back. Let's delve back into last week from the thing that I kind of threw at your doorstep today, and it's on some level it's kind of embarrassing that this kind of slipped by both of us, at least to a certain extent, because it is kind of glaring. It's a question, at least, and the fact that that is let's do the Wayback Machine, do the wavy lines to go back to the Civil War special. That as we're getting brought up to snuff for those who didn't read War Journal, we find out about John Stewart having the Dark Star ring. We find out about the construct Ellie Rose, which again we don't get a whole lot of explanation for how that happened, if you didn't already know. But you get an explanation that's the status quo. But there's one glaring thing about John's status quo that was changed in War Journal that doesn't get discussed at all. Then you get to the point where Amazo there, Jadestone, comes into the fray in the storyline, and Hal makes the point of saying, because Amazo detects that everybody in the room, pretty much other than Hal, has an unauthorized ring, though he really zeroes in on Guy. But Hal says, don't worry, I asked him to bring you new ones. So he says plural. He's talking about, if it was just Guy, he should have just said, I asked him to bring you a new one. But he says new ones, which means, logically, two of the other three lanterns in that room, besides Hal, had to get, or at least two, had to get new rings. Now, we know Guy's one of them, so that leaves Shepard, and it leaves John Stewart. As you pointed out, technically, if they replace Shepard's ring, it could be a problem, because he had in his universe, like the lanterns that came before that died, kind of like ended up disincorporating into the ring. So Kyle, his universe's Kyle, is in that ring, talking to him. And the thing they don't talk about at all with John Stewart's new status quo is that friggin' Shirley Stewart is the, whatever the hell this means, because it doesn't make any sense, because it's AI, it shouldn't have a soul. But he described it at the end, wrapping that up in the epilogue, little backup story, that Shirley Stewart is the soul of his ring. So one of these guys had to lose their rings based on what was being said here. We don't know who, but it creates a plot problem no matter what. And certainly for John, it would be a major plot problem, because he can't have his mother's be the AI in his ring if he's getting a brand new ring. But the fact that they don't even acknowledge that part of the status quo is kind of crazy. Just like, we got to see what's going to go on with this Dark Star ring. But if he brought the Dark Star ring back just so friggin' Tharos can use it for a few issues and then it gets destroyed, gee, that's great.
I mean, it's possible, because John did it with his ascended power, not with his Dark Star power. It's possible that John did get a new ring and just transferred everything into the new ring, but even that should theoretically be a big enough deal to show on panel.
Yeah, because again, as we were pondering why Philip Kennedy Johnson should be listed as a co-writer of that issue, the only thing we ever could put together really was, because, no pun intended here, that his role was to shepherd Jeremy into absorbing the status quo of War Journal into the regular Green Lantern book. That was one of the two major changes to John Stewart's status quo at the end of that storyline. Even the Ellie Rose thing really isn't a huge change to his personal status quo. It's the fact that he has the Dark Star ring, which they make sure to address, and the fact that the AI in his ring basically is his mother now. The fact that didn't get mentioned at all in the Civil War special, doesn't get mentioned this week, but yet, like I said, they make it clear Hal makes it clear that now, even if, Jadestone brought multiple rings, but I could only give out one because Shepard's ring needs this and John Stewart's ring needs that, then that also should have been addressed on page. But none of that was addressed. That's kind of really bad. That's kind of like a really bad omission to do that, because it was one of the things in War Journal that should have been something to be built on. And it still might be, but you've had the first two appearances of John Stewart post war journal in this book, and you haven't even mentioned, oh, by the way, this is a thing. So and the only reason it came upon me is because I was, for some stupid reason, I was thinking back to that interview that we did with Jeremy, because it kind of has always bothered me. And I blame myself more for this. I mean, we both could have, neither one of us did, but I blame me for this, even though he might never have given us an answer. But he is more forthcoming than others, so we might have got like a breadcrumb. When he kind of dropped that little reveal that editorial was okay, with him sweeping away some of the aspects of the Thorne continuity, the status quo, when he took over the book, but he didn't want to do that off panel. I was thinking about how that decision has really helped shape this book. And it'd be really interesting, maybe once he's off this book down the road, to find out exactly what elements of this book, of the status quo, he really could have just flushed, but he chose to keep, maybe because he wanted to use it for a story, not because editorial said, oh, you have to keep the status quo. Like the United Planets absolutely 100% have to still be in charge of the Green Lantern Corps. Or they have to be, or that power battery thing that Thorne created, that has to still be in effect when this book. We don't know, but he certainly made it clear some of that status quo could have been explained off panel, done away with. So I was thinking about that, about the ramifications of the story that we're getting now and how it might be different. And then for some reason, I thought about the war journal thing, like we talked about. We don't need any more spinning plates brought in, and that's when it dawned on me. Geez, they didn't talk at all about the Shirley Stewart stuff, nor do we even pick up on it. Probably because we were pretty disgruntled with that issue. Not that it's a real excuse, but it's probably what happened. But yeah, that's a pretty big omission when there's only like three. You can make a strong case. There's only three things of relevance that came out of War Journal from a plot perspective. Ellie Rose, and that's probably like number 3. The Dark Star ring right now would probably be number 1, and Shirley's probably sandwiched in between. And you would completely ignore the Shirley Stewart part.
Yeah. There's a lot of spinning plates. For those of you who know that we do this, at some point in the coming months, we're going to have our State of the Green Lantern Union, and I have no problem saying this now because I was thinking about it. One of those, they call them shower thoughts for a reason. I had a shower thought in prepping for the State of the Green Lantern Union. I am going to go back and start all over with issue 1 of this series, and I'm going to start writing down every single question that comes up, and then next to it when it's answered. And I'm going to have an actual numbered percentage of how many questions that this series has yet to answer, and we're going to talk about that during the State of the Green Lantern Union.
And maybe you're going to have the issue. You're going to have the numbers, but just like the raw total, maybe like in how many issues it took us to get said answer when we got one. We just got in this issue. We got we still don't know exactly physically what Tharos is doing, but we got
the how. We don't have the why. Or we got
the why. I think we got the why. I think we got more of the why than the how. We got
the how is Kelly.
Both. I'm thinking what his master plan was. His master plan was, about this basically setting up a 1,000-year Reich of Durlans, which is stupid unto itself. But we don't know. But still, it took us so many issues just finally, and when Tharos is on his deathbed, then we finally get some of these reveals again, not from him, but from his lackeys, who probably, I guess, were the ones that were standing close to his body last issue. That's probably what we can assume at this point, that they were the ones talking about, we should, should we take this power for ourselves, or whatever, however they phrase it. That's probably, these lackeys were probably the ones that count the other Durlans, which we talked about probably was the case, but we didn't know for a fact.
And then don't forget, guys, this is issue 16, but technically we also had Night Terrors 1 and 2, so this is technically issue 18. But don't forget, we had the Silver Corps special, so this is issue 19.
And we already know the story goes at least through 18.
Yeah.
So no matter how, and I respected that you did it. Now we have to move beyond the fact that it hasn't really been 2 years. It's essentially going to be 2 years worth of stories by the time this resolves. Even if it wrapped up in issue 20, it's still going to be basically 2 years worth of stories. So we've had a 2-year. This is going to be at least a 2-year story built around Derlin. So this is probably like the big thing we can take from this, no matter how this ends. For a future Green Lantern writer, don't plan on doing a super long story built around fucking Derlins. Because this is just like Uprising, except it's slightly more interesting, but it may not be any shorter, and it's still not great. I mean, Jeremy, I think, is doing a better job overall still, because I think he probably has a little more oomph to him. But yeah, the Derlins and the United Planets, that's a great combination to not good. Not good.
All right. What's next with that out of the way?
Well, is it really out of the way if we're going to do some feedback? We're kind of like dragged right back in.
Oh, I wanted to mention, we talked to, because you were talking about, the Civil Core special, something we talked about last episode. Speaking of last episode, we were talking about that McFarlane figure, that Hal Jordan. Got some photos today from some people over on Twitter. That Hal Jordan is already appearing in Walmarts right now, just FYI. So if anybody out there is looking for that, I'm not going to get it, but if anybody out there is looking for it, it's out there. Also, effigy has been spotted also in the wild at Walmart's. So because the same picture of someone showing us that Hal Jordan was out there also had effigy on a different peg. So effigy and that Hal Jordan are out there in the wild right now. And speaking of McFarlane, today we got news and images of their Superpowers line, the smaller collectible. What is that? What's the scales, like 3.5 inch or something like that?
Should be, or maybe 3.75.
Yeah. The Superpower stuff that they already have, Hal and Kilowog and Sinestro and John and Guy we just got announcements of a few JSA members, including Alan Scott, classic Alan Scott. So that will be coming soon to you guys soon, I guess. I'm assuming they were announcing a wave, but I guess it could be a 3-pack. I don't know, but I'm guessing it's just still a single wave, because it was Hourman and who was the other one?
Oh, I'm trying to pull it up now.
Yeah, it was Alan and I
Starman.
Starman and Hourman. Yeah, right.
It's a 3-pack.
Yeah, Hourman right there. That's his hourglass around his neck.
Yeah, and it is a 3-pack.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
There's a 3-pack.
Yep, because it's $30.
Okay, so that'll be out there soon. So pay attention to that. Just a quick little update.
Yeah, it is an interesting. They're rolling out these things, fast and furious. That when we recorded last, probably like 2 days after. I think it was 2 days after we recorded that my Parallax Sinestro arrived. So they shipped that pretty quick, and that's still available. Looking at Target, that's still available to order, and it usually does ship like in about 2 days. Hey, speaking of which, you can get the McFarlane's the Crisis on Infinite Earth Spectre for like $39 on now. Walmart. Of course, the caveat, I'm sure, is you have no chance in hell probably of even having a chance to get the variant, but consider.
See, I still haven't even gotten Necron yet. Like, out of all of the ones I haven't gotten yet, and have gone on sale on various sites, Necron is still pretty expensive, I think.
But at least Necron but he's giant. He's a deluxe. So at least that makes sense.
Yellow Lantern Sinestro is the only other one I don't yet have and still need. I like Parallax Sinestro, but something about there's so much yellow without a break in the yellow that something about it bugs me. I'm sorry. There's something wrong with that paint job. I don't know what it is, but I can't put my finger on it. But I do want the regular Sinestro. So that's something I still need to get. Necron I still need to get. And believe it or not, have you seen it? The Kryptonite Doomsday?
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a store, but I've seen the pictures of it. Yes.
I want to get that too at some point, because that's from my favorite. There've been different volumes over the years of Superman, Batman, like literally Superman / Batman is the title name. But there was one several years back where one of the story arcs was called The Search for Kryptonite, where Superman and Batman made it a point to try and gather up all the kryptonite, not just green, but all the different colored kryptonites too. And then at some point, Amanda Waller got a hold of that's what they were doing. So she started weaponizing as much kryptonite as she could and then started creating clone doomsdays with, instead of the regular bone spurs, kryptonite bone spurs, which is just the pinnacle of comic book stupidity. And of course, only a comic book would think of this. How else do we make Doomsday just as dangerous as, and also neuter him at the same time? Let's inject him with kryptonite, and also make 6,000 of them, so he's no more of a, not much of a threat anymore.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, unless he completely behaved like real Doomsday, where he would continually evolve, so you whatever, which is one of the things I always hated about that Superman story when they had him trapped in the Watchtower transporter tubes. That would have been such a really clever thing to do if they had, of course it's too tempting. It's like dangling that carrot in front of you. That is, if you had just let him stay there long enough. And of course it didn't have to be eternally in a storytelling perspective, because at this point Doomsday is pretty advanced. That eventually, if you left him in the status tubes, long enough, that the reality is each one should have evolved to be a full Doomsday, which would have been a real problem. That was tailor made for a story, because of the fact that, but of course they never kept those pieces of them separated that long. But I always thought about that. It's like, wow, it's a real clever way to beat him once and beat him for a short term. But you do realize, technically speaking, at some point, each one of these individual Doomsdays will probably evolve beyond the point that these transport tubes being in a hiatus, just being locked into a permanent state of mid transport. Eventually, he's going to escape, and then could have 3 of these guys, or 4 of these guys you got to deal with. But no, that story never happened, sadly. All right, so let's do at least this one thing of feedback.
Yeah.
This is Anis. He emailed us it wasn't that long ago that we did one of his. This is really topical, so that's one of the main reasons I should say we're going to do it, because it relates to the Civil Corps special, among other things. Hey guys, hope you are doing well. I listened to your Civil Corps special episode and I have some thoughts. The art, I can pretty much agree with what you said about it. LaRocca being announced on the book made me expect all of these problems, since the controversy surrounding him back since his extreme X-Men and Iron Man runs is that he aligns action figures in certain poses, takes a photo of them, and traces them while altering some things in the process, which cause inconsistencies, like how Hal's head doesn't fit proportionally with his body. As for the story being so long, I honestly don't blame the writers for this, since it's a thing that the big two force on writers these days. Like Batman, which has been doing the failsafe story since before Dawn of DC, and that was wrapped up in absolute power. On the Marvel side, Ben Percy did 125 issues on Wolverine and X-Force, 100 main issues plus specials and miniseries, and all of them had 2 plots about Beast and Sabretooth being the villains. Both titles were complementary to one another, so it wasn't 60 issues of this and 65 issues of that, but 125 of the same BS. Let's just break there for a second. I agree partially, or maybe more than partially, with the fact that we certainly can agree that we can't blame all of this all the time on the writers. That being said, even if you were giving a marching order, which I don't think every single book is getting given a marching order, hey, you need to do a 2-issue story, a 2-year, potentially 24-issue story all the time. I mean, because we know, and I know Morrison is Morrison, so he gets to buck the trend, but at least Morrison may have had one major plot going through each one of his seasons, but at least he broke that into smaller arcs, in which not every single arc seemingly had a direct tie to the major thing that was going on. But even if this was true, how you approach that edict, still, there is a certain amount of responsibility you have to put on the writer's doorstep. So unless DC said we want you to do it like an 18 plus issue, 20 plus issue when you add in the Night Terrors and the one shot here. We want you to do it basically a 2-year story built all around Durlan's and the United Planets, and unless they told Jeremy specifically that's what he had to do, then some of these choices fall on his doorstep. How he's doing that. That kind of goes back to what I said. Until if we knew which elements of the story he had the right to get rid of the Thorn run, and he chose to keep for whatever reason or reasons, until we know that, it's kind of hard to know how much of this is all on him, how much of it is editorial, where the split is. But I do agree with the basic point that he's making that, editorial and these companies tend to have wanted these big overarching stories, but you have to pick your battles, because obviously this doesn't work for every single book, and every single story is not designed or shouldn't be designed to last multiple years, let alone 12 issues.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the deal with that. Like, yes, I because I've been seeing it. Like I said, I mentioned it. I said it's been happening in indie comics for a long time, where you're not getting, every volume or 2 volumes of a trade paperback. So that's 6 to 12 issues is the automatic dial turn to the next arc, the next story, the next beat. Right? It's just they're longer and longer and longer beats. But here's the deal. Like, and here's the comparison I'm going to make. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All right, let's go with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You can say, you know what, for the next 2 years worth of storyline, I want you to be building up to this one thing. But here's the deal. You start off with the Turtles and their origin and how they got there, and Splinter, and then they start fighting crime. So you start talking about how they were trained, and then you start talking about they start fighting crime, and then they start running into the Foot Clan. Who is the Foot Clan? How did they start showing up? They start getting more information on Shredder. Who's Shredder? Where did he come from? We get answers for that. And then, wait, Shredder has his own mutants. Where is he getting the mutagen from? Where's the mutagen from? Oh, he actually has ties and partners with somebody from Dimension X. What the hell is Dimension X? Dimension X and Krang. Krang is the big villain that we're going to be building up the TMNT to be fighting over the next 2 years worth of storylines. But guess what? We have pieces getting answered all along the way. You are building to that point. You are not stalling until that point. You got to build and answer some of those questions along the way. You can't just, okay, we're going to kind of hint that this is where we're going, and we're just going to keep slowly pushing towards that finish line without actually answering any questions. And in fact, we're going to add more mystery to it instead of answering anything until we get to that point. No, you build the mystery by answering some of the questions and then adding more, not just adding more questions.
I agree.
Yeah.
And again, it's how you approach some of the stories. We go back to the Johns run. We know Johns obviously had some master plans when he started doing Green Lantern. He kind of knew where he wanted to go for a lot of that run, and there was a build up to a lot of things. But with like using that as the example, a lot of the build up, besides the individual stories you were telling, like you were kind of referring to, the arc, besides the fact that the individual arcs in the big, in the year-long build-up or the 2-year build-up to the next story, the individual arcs were interesting by themselves. There was some payoff, and that all kind of like tied together when you finally got to, the crux of what you've been aiming towards. That's different. I mean, it's like I said, it's like Uprising. Uprising took forever. It didn't do anything, and it was boring. This is better than Uprising, but but there's a lot of common threads here, and not just, with the Durlans, it's just things that meander on too long. Even looking at the solicit for 18, which I just did. 18 kind of suggests that it's probably going to be wrapped up by issue 20, but like Tharos doesn't seemingly arrive on Oa until issue 18. Which means, is he not going to be in issue 17, or is he going to show up on the splash page probably to end issue 17? And it's like, it's just it's just stretching it, and I think that's
I mean,
part of the problem.
yeah, and also don't forget the idea that, and I would like to try and find these quotes before we get to the State of the GL Union. But remember, like when Thorne's run ended, he was like, "Well, if I would have gotten like X amount of time, I could have gotten to the point where I could answer this question, this question, this question." That's just it. You're not guaranteed it. You're not guaranteed that you have X amount of time on a title. I don't care what editorial person told you that, hey, don't worry about it, man. You've got X amount of time. At any point, corporate or whatever, anything can change. There's no guarantee you're going to have any amount of time on a title. I think besides Jeff Johns, who proved himself and got the chance to just do whatever the F he wanted for a while, the only other person who's maybe gotten close with that with Green Lantern, as much as I hate to admit it, would be Grant Morrison, because Grant Morrison is fucking Grant Morrison. He's one of the biggest names in comics, period, of our generation. So like if they wanted to do that, I'm sure they could have done that. But I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but the fact that we didn't get Grant Morrison's season 3, I just assumed they decided they didn't want to do it. So they stepped aside and it went to somebody else. I don't think sales had anything to do with it.
Oh no, because it couldn't be sales because that book sold fairly well.
Yeah.
That the what it could have been, because don't forget that we were right at the cusp. We were right getting into the regime change when DiDio was gone or was about to leave. So the only thing that could be possible, and this kind of proves your point even more, that it could be a mutually agreed parting of the ways, where maybe he didn't want to do it. I mean, it could just simply be he didn't want to do 3 seasons anyway, because it took the right approach, the right concept from his perspective for him to even be interested in doing a Green Lantern book, especially with Hal Jordan. So he may have only had like a 2-year plan of what he wanted to do, but it also may have been with DiDio being out, that the people that were coming in, the status quo, it could have been a little bit of the fact that even before, I forget the timing of everything, that even if DiDio technically was still there in the beginning, I think of the Thorne run or whatever, if that was the case, he kind of may have known the writing was on the wall and he just wasn't comfortable. There wasn't enough of an incentive for even him to want to come back. And whoever, even if it was DiDio, he may have wanted to say, well, it might be time. This was cool, but I think we need to have a little bit more of a mainstream, quote unquote, Green Lantern book again. Mm-hmm. But either way, again, it's how you approach it, and that is part of that's on the writer, no matter how you slice it. There's a certain responsibility there. The problem with that is that sales were consistent, as both titles for the most part were always in the top 30, so editors just kept forcing stretches on the story. Similar things happened with the Avengers by Aaron, Flash by Cy Spurrier, King's Wonder Woman. That first arc is confirmed to end with issue 25, and many more titles from the big 2. Decompression doesn't affect sales of the titles positively or negatively. It's about how the name of the title and the writer on it keeping a certain amount of people buying it regardless of the story. X-Force, that was meandering while being in the top 30, is now either number 50 or outside of the top 50 under Thorne, because he's not high profile like Percy, although Percy's run has way more problems than Thorne's. Corwin could probably talk about that more than we can, certainly. Yeah. I'm going to try it one more time without stopping, but it's a really rough sentence. I'm sorry. What Adams is doing with Green Lantern is doing to keep some interest in it, is giving enough breadcrumbs for us to keep us satisfied to some extent. He's being like, you love Kyle, where he's important and he has a huge role that you won't see for 17 issues, but I'll tease it enough to keep Kyle fans buying. You love Hal and Kara. Well, there was a 17 issues Night Terrors included arc about their relationship and her wanting to become a hero that'll keep you buying, and so on. When that teasing isn't available, it drops sales, which we've seen with Thorne, who got 12 issues and not more, partially because Kyle and Hal fans were constantly reminded by him on social media and in story that he doesn't care for their favorites, which is why he took away what made them special, Hal's special powers and Kyle being the torchbearer. He actually, I don't think, is the one who really took Kyle away from being the torchbearer. He did take away Hal's special powers. Let's not forget that. He certainly that probably was not you can make a strong case that obviously was not necessary for Hal's ring to be wiped out. That being said, Thorne's run was, as we just discussed a few minutes ago, Thorne's run had tons of issues, including, to be perfectly blunt, yeah, him shooting off his mouth about Hal Jordan was very, very poor way to go. And people do this all the time. That just the old saying about just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. He has every right to hate Hal Jordan or think Hal Jordan's not an interesting character, or to have a love fest for Jon Stewart enough, and potentially that being a bigger issue with some people, that they resent Hal getting all the focus when they think it should be Jon, for whatever reason or reasons that they think it should be Jon. Doesn't matter. The stuff he got off on a horrible foot because of him shooting himself in the foot by talking about his dislike and a disdain for Hal Jordan, generally speaking. And then he had to backtrack and make it, oh, that's not going to affect how I'm going to write the character. And it's like, well, maybe that's true, but but you kind of knew you probably had to show the character a certain amount of respect, or else you'd really be in trouble when the character showed up. But it's like we talked about, the fact that he had like a 3-year plan and he really didn't have he was in no great hurry to start answering some of these big questions in the first year of the book, as Annis pointed out, as you said yourself, the fact that he's not high profile enough to have that kind of delusion of grandeur kind of storytelling approach. So I don't really think it was Kyle and Hal fans necessarily that were just constantly reminded about. I don't think the book was pleasing to almost anyone, unless even if you were a diehard Jon Stewart fan. There were some things he did in that book that weren't great, like the whole bringing in the hyper time Jon Stewart, who still remains our Jon Stewart, which is the stupidest thing about giving us two. It should have been the hyper time Jon Stewart that was out looking for like Cap Matui, or finding a universe where Cap Matui's alive and all this stuff, not ours. Unless there was a bigger picture plan, not his, where DC was kind of on board with it. It's like, okay, this is what we're going to do, but there probably isn't. Gad, you can talk about that.
I don't have much to say about this one.
Okay. This also affects the word of mouth. I got into Green Lantern with Thorne's run, and the general thing I kept hearing was, it's bad, don't read it. Read an old book instead. This isn't happening with Green Lantern by Adams or War Journal. Well, I don't know about War Journal. People just weren't reading War Journal. To the contrary, people who aren't Lantern aficionados like you, but have some interest in the franchise, are not saying anything bad about the two titles like they did about Thorne's. Again, I might agree with that, maybe about Jeremy's book, maybe. I find a hard time believing it about, which isn't to say there aren't some people that liked War Journal, but I think it's a very small group of people that would have nice things to say overall about War Journal, or else the book would have been selling better. Sorry for the long email. Me using those other examples to convey my POV needlessly makes my email super long, but that's because I want my point to be clear as possible. We appreciate that. Side note, coming into Green Lantern with Thorne, I got bored by the first issue or two, so instead I went back to the Johns era and read everything from it till Thorne's run. Then with reading Adams' era, I went back to read Kyle's era. So thanks to the bad mouthing of Thorne, I became a Green Lantern super geek who read everything from Emerald Twilight, I think he means through the Civil War special, except for Threshold and Larfleeze. I'm just going to listen to whatever episodes you did on both. Well, you can.
We still haven't tackled Larfleeze yet, buddy.
I was just going to say, you can listen to Threshold, but spoiler alert, Larfleeze again is a very acquired taste, like a lot of DeMatteis and Giffen stuff. There were some cool things in it, but obviously not enough to pump us enough to do it. And that book hasn't been. How long ago?
To be perfectly honest, I'm actually surprised we did Threshold before we did Larfleeze.
Well, don't forget Threshold. We were lucky because part of it was done ahead of time.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think Larfleeze was only 12 issues. I think, but it's. Yeah, like I said, like most DeMatteis Giffen things, it's a really acquired taste, and there's some cool things in it, but spoiler alert, it really isn't all that interesting.
Yeah.
And I like Larfleeze. I was kind of looking forward to that book.
Yeah. It's talking about how, to the contrary, people who aren't Lantern aficionados like you, but have some interest in the franchise, are not saying anything bad about the two titles like they did about Thorns. So, I've been listening to more regularly to podcast the Boa with Myron and Phil, but usually uh, as long as we're ahead of them in terms of our recordings, because I don't like listening to their stuff before we do commentary on the same material. I don't like their opinions seeping into my own and even subconsciously affecting my thoughts on it. Or trying to, let's say a couple of days have passed and then I'm trying to recap it and then I suddenly, uh, add one of their thoughts to my own critique that I just forgot was one of theirs originally or whatever. And yeah, Myron and Phil enjoy the War Journal quite a bit. More than us, but even you'll hear it. Even Myron is like he kind of lost me a bit with the Olgren stuff. Myron and Phil are typically more positive than we are. Although if you listen to the more recent episode where the Kyle Chandler news is has been announced, Myron flew off the handle there for a little bit.
I know. I want to highly recommend that episode.
It's a good one.
I know, especially it takes a while before he gets to his Ryan Reynolds rant, but it's worth it. But yes, yeah. I wanted to mention that last week, so I'm kind of glad and I had it written down right now to mention it when you got done talking about but you already did it, so we're covered.
But I mean, hey, my like even though Myron and Phil are more positive than us, generally speaking, it's clear that Myron's picking up on some of the same stuff we were talking about in terms of like the Olgren stuff. Is like, wait, that came out of left field. What the hell is that? But they're overall more positive. Plus, I know Phil really enjoyed PKJ's Superman stuff and is a big Superman fan and hadn't read Superman for a while. And PKJ's Superman stuff brought him back in, so he has those ties there. So they just have a different experience and a different outlook, but they still are seeing a lot of the same stuff we are and reacting to it just in a more positive way. But they see the same problems with the Olgren stuff we did. And that's part of the reason, and I'm not, this is not my goal with the State of the Green Lantern Union episode, but that's part of the reason I'm going to do what I'm going to do in literally coming up with a list of facts and numbers behind what's going on with the amount of questions asked of this series thus far versus the amount answered, so that I can run that by Myron and Phil and actually hear them talk about that, because I haven't really heard them talk about the length of this series thus far. I think I might have heard them kind of mention it a little bit. I think more recently, I heard Myron say this has been going on a little longer, but like they didn't harp on it when it was like a throwaway sentence.
Yeah,
I think they're feeling it too.
Yeah, I think to be fair, because even when you were talking about that being more positive, I think you are correct. I think just from listening to some of the things that going along with your sentiment, they may be framing it differently, but yes, they I think are acknowledging that this is kind of dragging on a little bit.
Yeah. And the other thing too is with it dragging on, I want to say specifically about the Civil Corps special. For instance, you yourself writing into us and us that particular issue prompted some feedback for you, and so did it prompted some feedback for us over on Twitter. I post every episode that we get over on Twitter that it's live, but not everybody chimes in and goes and says what they particularly think about an issue over on Twitter, unless maybe it's one or two people here and there. But specific to Civil Corps special, the Civil Corps special, there's actually a lot more people that weighed in than have done so normally, because let's see, I just wanted to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. Coffee and Comics. I'm sick of blank becomes a blank lantern twists. I miss when there were qualifications to become a lantern. Now it's just anybody can wear a ring, and we color switch the moment somebody has a bad day. Dimensional Lantern feels like all 3 GL books combined into a nothing burger of a story in favor of turning the pages to reveal cool splash art. Also, where was Sinestro? Why wasn't he in the book when he's used in the cover? And a few other things here and there. So like normally we don't hear that kind of feedback on a particular issue, and I would not be surprised if some of the comics left on that tweet when I announced that episode was out, going over the coverage of the special, were before they even listened to the special coverage. So like there are other people out there who have been like, you know what, I kind of see what you're saying about this series thus far with Jeremy Adams and everything, but overall it's been enjoyable for the art or this or that or whatever. But I feel like the set dressing is starting to break for some people. And we've just been talking about it longer than other people have started catching up with us.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because again, some people are just inherently more positive, like Dan, but even, I mean, I think even Dan kind of has acknowledged when he's been on, when we talked about stuff, that the thing is that we're not getting a lot of information here.
Yep.
And the reality is, again, if the story were more interesting, then the build-up can work. It's like a really good murder mystery. If it's really being built up well, then you don't really care like it's 400 pages. But if it's dragging on and dragging on, you're not getting nothing new, and almost nothing new is getting introduced, and it's like, oh, you keep treading over the same things over and over again. It's like, okay. And then you combine, then it really all hangs on the resolution and the denouement. And if it doesn't work, then that's even worse. Now, because let's be honest, the odds of getting a super satisfying end to this arc are pretty remote. And that might have just been because of the setup, because you're resting it on the United Planets and the Durlans. It's like the Bizarro peanut butter cup. Two bad tastes that taste worse together. So, I mean, are we going to get the Guardians back by the end of this arc? Is that what we're going to get? I mean, are they going to make a triumphant return at the end?
Speaking of, we were talking about the Quintessence not too long ago. That's a Guardian in there? Where the hell did he come from?
That's true. Ganth, that's true. Ganth is still around, and it's like, yeah. So maybe we will. But these answers to the Spectrum is a problem, and even the fact that we got to wait 2 more issues before we find out what the hell the deal is when Kyle figures something. Now maybe next issue Kyle's going to start acting up. And he's going to start picking up more about what's going on. There's no logical reason why, in all honesty, but based on where we are now. But still, it's the fact that the story is really, really, it's hard. It's losing steam because it's going uphill a lot, and it's tough. So I think a lot of people are more positive, and it's like, well, we don't want to judge this too soon. We don't want to judge it too soon. But after a while, it's like you got to call a spade, and that's where we are. Yeah. It's like War Journal. You and I both were like, we were pretty invested in War Journal, at least for like the first 4 or 5 issues.
Surprisingly,
I know,
so.
For both of us, and the backup stories, we were invested probably for like the first third of the book, and then once you got to the Olgren reveal, then it was just sucked all the air out of the room. Because again, at the end of the day, it was like a vanity project. That's what the story he wanted to tell. He couldn't really tell it when he wanted to tell it the way originally in the Superman book. It didn't belong. So then the next time he got an opportunity, or he maybe petitioned maybe to do the Green Lantern book because he would fit it into there. So, and then that's why the status quo will be very important. If this ring is just going to dissipate, if Varen's just going to disappear and the ring's going to disintegrate, it's like, really? Then what the hell was the whole point of it? But really,
and I think, quite honestly, the reason not a lot of people are talking bad about this, either of these 2 series, according to you, is because I think you're right. A lot of people are not, because they're still struggling with it, because there is a lot to like about both of these series. We can look back on War Journal and be like, yes, the Olgren stuff was crazy and came out of left field and didn't really jibe right with us. But let's face it, the Ellie and the Shirley stuff was really, really well written. It struck a really interesting, thought-provoking, emotional balance between the reality of watching a loved one fade in front of you, but still be alive, but just fade in front of you, and trying to struggle with that amnesia the Alzheimer's, and also tying that into the fantastical fictional world of superheroism, but still keeping it compelling and interesting. And then the Matos' art was really great for that entire series. So like a full half of that series was really compelling and interesting all the way through till the end. And then 100% of that series was really interesting for the first third of it until you got to the Olgren stuff. So there was, so percentage wise, a big portion, an undeniable portion of War Journal was really very good and interesting. But then there was something that really drug it down like a rock. And then there's really great stuff to be found in the Jeremy Adams stuff. He's got a lot of passion. And just this issue, we were just talking about it. Hal and John syncing up and just getting the damn thing done, having some fun together, and just really syncing up. Carol stepping up to the plate in not like a big way, but just enough of a way where you can tell she's getting a feel for things. Regardless of their back and forth, there's been a lot of us talking with Dan and you and me about, the intricacies or the creepiness or not creepiness, or how does it read, or how is it really supposed to be of the Hal and Carol, and will they, won't they, like that. The fact that it prompts that much discussion it just tells you that that's some good writing. There's lots of good about Jeremy's stuff, even up until now. And I will stand by that, including Zermanico's art. But there's just this one thing. And then in the case of these non-answers dragging out, the rock that's dragging it down is getting heavier and heavier by the issue.
It also doesn't help that we seem to have been, we're kind of in this yo-yo pattern with this book. It seems like we have a good issue, then we have a bad issue, then we have and again, it's not like horribly bad necessarily. I mean, the Civil War special was honestly pretty bad. But most of these issues are not, even when they're like this. Well, this isn't great on its own, but it's not horrible, and it's also better than what came before. But we're constantly going up and down here. So even when we get some kind of momentum going, it seems like either you get stuck with the absolute power or another crossover, or you just have an issue that kind of like just slams a torpedo into your hull, and then you got to like start over from scratch again. So I don't think that helps. I don't think that helps this book either.
But thanks for writing in on us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, if anybody else wants to reach out to us, how do they do so?
See, now I don't have time to do my Joker for Leah Dude discussion, which really wasn't going to be a discussion anyway. But I'll say, this will wait for another episode because nobody went to see that movie anyway, so it doesn't really matter. LanternCast.com. The email is lanterncast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, #GeoCast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, whatever platform you listen to us on. Please leave us a positive review. Last but not least, if you'd like to leave us a text or a voicemail, 708-LANTERN, and let us know what you think.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.